This is Victoria Cartagena. I play Renee Montoya on Gotham, and you're listening to Gotham TV Podcast.
Hey, this is Andrew Stewart-Jones. I play Christopher Allen on Gotham, and you are listening to Gotham TV Podcast.
How would Alfred deal with these two visitors to Gotham from Ireland?
Well, I mean, first of all, how did you get to the door? And secondly, I'd grasp you firmly by the elbow and I'd walk you very smartly to the gates, and I might even show you my commando knife. How's that?
You could set the dogs on us as well.
Yeah, well, no, I don't need dogs, mate.
Welcome back to Fear, and more importantly, Gotham TV Podcast, the home of the hit show Gotham and the DC Connected Universe. I'm one of your hosts, John.
And I'm Derek. Welcome.
Welcome indeed. This is episode 15 of season 1 now of Gotham, entitled The Scarecrow. And there certainly was a scarecrow as well.
There certainly was, yeah, really cool.
A big one, flapping in the wind and looking a bit like the Destroyer from Thor, actually.
No, interesting.
A bit of a glowing mouth as though it's about to shoot something out.
Yeah.
It reminded me of. But very creepy little use of the scarecrow motif there. Brilliant.
Yeah, I certainly had the fear in some of the scenes in this episode.
Oh, did you have the FEAR?
Yeah, classic tune.
Absolutely classic. And of course, this is the 40th episode of Gotham TV Podcast. So welcome to new listeners, and hello again to all those that are still listening.
Definitely.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, and with that, a little bit of an announcement at the start of this episode. We also do a podcast called Defenders TV Podcast, which covers the Marvel Netflix TV shows and the connected Marvel universe. This week on April 10th, Netflix will be releasing the show Daredevil, so we'll be releasing our first review podcast for the Daredevil TV show on April 10th.
Yeah, not all 13 episodes in one day like Netflix. Our organisation, our cottage industry, isn't quite as big or as extensive as Netflix. We'll be bringing our first review episode of Daredevil, hopefully on the same day, if not that weekend, April 10th. And then we'll be releasing 2 episodes of Daredevil each week, hopefully. We are joined by additional members, so there'll be obviously myself, John, and Derek, but we'll also be joined by Irene and also Chris, who will also be reviewing the episodes of Daredevil. And of course, in the years to come, we will also be reviewing aka Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, Luke Cage, and the miniseries Defenders.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to subscribe to that podcast, you can go to defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes, subscribe to us on iTunes, and just like the Gotham TV Podcast, you can also subscribe on our website or listen to us in any good podcast catchers. We have already released 4 episodes of Defenders TV Podcast so far, covering the setup for Daredevil, some of the trailers, and some of the characters that you're going to see in that show.
Plus the Ben Affleck film of 2003, Daredevil, The Man Without Fear.
I almost blocked that out. But it's a good review.
It's a good review. It has bags of sand on a string, if I remember. So head on down to where we review Elektra's bizarre fighting style of bags of sand on a string.
Yeah, so as I said, head over to defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes to go and subscribe to those podcasts, and hopefully you'll join us for the Marvel Netflix TV shows.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to that.
I think with that then, it's on to our review of The Scarecrow.
Okay, so this episode of Gotham, episode 15, is directed by Nick Kopus, who's directed a bunch of episodes of Arrow and of Flash. I think he's directed only 1 episode of Flash so far. But yeah, another DC talent crossover there. It's also written by Ken Woodruff, who's another one of the executive producers for Gotham and wrote Arkham in the past, episode 4 of Gotham, which is a great episode.
Yeah, great episode. Really good.
So, John, do you want to give us a synopsis of this episode?
Gerald Crane and his son, Jonathan, are still on the run from the law and still harvesting adrenal glands as Dr. Crane continues to develop and refine his serum, which he begins to use on himself and his son to inoculate them against their fear. As the G.C.P.D. continue their investigation of the Crane's victims, Jim's life at the precinct suddenly becomes slightly more complicated with the arrival of Dr. Leslie Tompkins as the new medical examiner. Just how will Jim balance their romance with their professional work relationship? After the boat Fish left Gotham on was overrun by unknown assailants, she finds herself in a desperate situation, locked in a basement. Or is it a prison? Or is it hell? Fish begins to plot her way to the top of this underworld in an attempt to take charge and find out exactly who runs and controls the facility which she finds herself trapped in. Her former adversary, Oswald, is still skulking around Gotham, trying to avoid Maroni, and pleads with Falcone to protect him from Salvador Maroni. Falcone gives Oswald a task, though, to own and manage Fish's old club for money, influence, and control. As he requests this of Oswald, Falcone also bargains with Maroni for Oswald's life. Whilst both men continue to underestimate Penguin, his life is finally secured. However, Maroni provides his final thought to Cobblepot. You better hope the old man, Falcone, lives a long life. When he's gone, I'm coming for you. The G.C.P.D. finally identify Gerald Crane as a former biology teacher. They discover his motives for his murders, that they're driven by the desire and obsession to conquer his fear that led to his wife's tragic death in a house fire. Jim and Harvey track him to an old derelict house. As Gerald and Jonathan flee the house, the confrontation results in a huge overdose of the fear serum by Jonathan, administered by the hands of his father, but overseen by a scarecrow that will come to haunt and be a motif for Jonathan's life to come, as he is left in a constant state of terror.
Yeah. Were you left in a constant state of terror by this episode?
No, I can't say I was. However, I loved all the stuff to do with the Scarecrow. I thought right at the end, that Scarecrow all around the hospital bed, really, that was really terrifying. That was really well done.
Really good, isn't it?
Yeah. That would scare me if I was lying in a hospital bed with that coming at me from below the bed, from around the top of the headboard, and all that. That was really good. And I loved the motif of one of my points, the Scarecrow in the back field or the back garden of the house where Jonathan and Gerald were kind of were all hauled up in. I thought that was really good as well. I thought they did that really, really well. Yeah. But I don't think it was scary as such, this episode.
Okay, all right. Well, with that, I think we're on to our top 5 for this episode, which overall I enjoyed. I must say, a good episode and good to have a 2-parter for the first time really in the show.
Yeah, a nice solid episode, definitely.
Yeah. So my first point is about the scares in this episode. I loved the opening sequence, to open it up with a direct follow-up to last week. Even though Gerald Crane has gotten away with the crime, essentially, he's escaped from Jim and from Harvey at the end of last week's episode. He's still on the search for some new organs, for harvesting some more from in a really scary scene as the other teacher from the school arrives home to his apartment in the dark, turns on the lights, and in the background you see what turns out to be Jonathan. Crane standing in the background of the scene. I think it's a really well shot scene, like something out of Insidious or something out of a good little scary horror film that you'd see at the moment. And then he hears a rattling at the door, and in comes Gerald Crane, dressed up with horns on his head for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, basically, Gerald's still up to his old tricks, and this time he's brought in his son as well. Were they zombies? Devils?
Yeah.
Vampires? It was really interesting to see what they did there, and I did like the whole flash of lightning. And you see I think it was Jonathan silhouetted against the window, obviously as the teacher comes in and is kind of putting his briefcase down and all that. That was really good, definitely.
Just as a scene, I thought it was fantastic. It's a good opener to kind of bring you back in. It really felt like something that they should really have done at Halloween, maybe. It feels like a weird thing to watch this in around Easter time, to see an episode that is much more close to a horror Halloween episode, really.
Well, the Scarecrow had its arms stretched out. Very biblical.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, maybe that's the reason.
But I agree. It definitely would have been, to me, more of a Halloween episode, certainly with the whole Scarecrow element to it, you know, and just that whole fear motif running throughout, definitely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, do you want to give us your first point about this? I presume it's something to do with the Scarecrow.
It is. I suppose my 5 points this week, apart from maybe one of them, are all to do with kind of couples, partnerships, father-son relationships, that kind of thing. And I suppose my first one would be Gerald and Jonathan. And I think you kind of brought it out here where we see Jonathan helping out his dad now. I think as well we see more of Jonathan. It was mainly Gerald in the previous episode, the fearsome Dr. Crane. And now we just begin to get a bit more information about Jonathan and also about Gerald's motives as well. And I really liked how they dealt with that. I mean, I thought the whole inoculation by Gerald of himself with this fear serum and the vision that he sees, the hallucination, maybe more appropriately, of his wife, his dead wife, coming down the stairs as they all burst into flames. I thought that was really well done. I thought it was really evoking of why he's afraid and why he's driven himself to these depths in order to overcome it. I also think I really like the dubiousness of why he's also administering it to his son. His son calls him out on it to say, but I'm not afraid like you. It's almost like he's forcing his own phobias and fears onto Jonathan. And that I find really, from a psychological level, really dark and complex. And I really enjoyed this interaction between the two, definitely.
Yeah, and just to call out that scene where his wife comes down the stairs on fire, essentially, that at that moment really felt like something out of Constantine. It felt like one of the intros to the Constantine episodes or Supernatural, those kind of shows. It really felt like something different, something very different for Gotham.
Absolutely,
a really well played scene and a really well put together moment, definitely. And just the injection. I'm not a huge fan of needles myself, as you probably know. But that scene where Gerald injects himself and his eyes turn green and he gets the eyes widen as well. Just a really well shot scene. Some good special effects. They don't do special effects very often on the show. It's usually quite practical effects and maybe some kind of CG work to enhance the city, which we know about, but not a huge amount of special effects like this. So seeing the effect that the injection has on Gerald, I thought was fantastically done.
No, exactly. I think as well then it comes to the title of the show and the money shots where Jonathan is being injected, essentially overdosed with this fear serum right at the end, where in a sense this is the origins of the Scarecrow. You know, this is where it begins, that journey. The motif of having the Scarecrow there whilst he's being injected by his dad. Again, his dad almost forcing this injection of the serum is obsessed by doing it, and almost Jonathan doesn't want this to happen, and then it happens, and again he just becomes overwrought with the power of this serum that's been injected, and then you get the whole money shot of the Scarecrow coming to life. But even before that, just the whole silhouette of that Scarecrow in the field, you know, it's very iconic, and it was great to see.
Yeah.
My only slight criticism, if anything, of it is I wish we had seen more of Jonathan. Maybe he was always scared of scarecrows. Maybe that was his phobia. We didn't really get or understand whether he had any fears or phobias. It seemed to be his dad pushing them on to him and forcing him to take this serum. And ultimately, Jonathan takes on the persona of the Scarecrow. So it's not necessarily something that he is fearful of. This I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
He takes it on, he adopts it, and in that sense, to me, it almost feels like it's a bit like how for example, Christopher Nolan portrayed Batman, and how Frank Miller in Batman Year One, where he takes on bats, these things that he was afraid of, he takes them on and runs with them and becomes what he was afraid of. And to me, this is what happens here with Jonathan Crane as well, ultimately. But here we see that he's afraid of them. So that I was unclear of, really.
Yeah.
And I wish they had spent a bit more time with Jonathan Crane and finding out a bit more about him, so that his backstory was really rooted properly. I just feel as though it wasn't rooted. And again,
Gotcha.
I think it was just that injection under the Scarecrow, it was very condensed. I loved it, but again, it's one of those points that I've always had with Gotham, is that sometimes some of the actions, some of the reasons why people are going to be who they are in the future are hugely condensed down. And I think this is one, given the bad guy involved, Jonathan Crane, because he was so central in the Nolan films, he's got much bigger, I think, presence in the world of Batman and Gotham now. I would have liked to have seen that a little less condensed, more spread out, like they're doing with the Riddler and with Penguin. But who knows? He may come back, and he may be in some future episodes. I really hope so, because I really liked the guy Charlie Tahan, who played Jonathan Crane here. I thought he was really good in the role.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I do understand the point, especially given that we had 2 episodes here, one with mostly Gerald Crane, and the other one with a little bit more of Jonathan. But Jonathan just seemed to be pleading with his father that he didn't want to. He would do the experiments if that's what his father wanted him to, but he still wanted to do them under, I suppose, safe circumstances. He definitely didn't want an entire needle full of fear toxin, I'm going to call it, injected into him. Potentially that is the reason why, he's probably about 14, I think. If I did the maths correctly, they talked about his mother dying about 5 to 6 years ago when he was 8. So he's about 13 or 14, the character. So it's still his formative years. He's still able to develop these kind of fears, and I would definitely develop that kind of fear underneath a Scarecrow that's breathing fire at me as my father stuffs tons of fear toxin into my blood. I understand that, but you're right. There should have been potentially he could have worked on a farm at night and had a bad moment with scarecrows before having this scene of him being injected underneath the Scarecrow that could have formed his fear, I suppose. Yeah. Something like that, some additional scene.
I think so. I liked what they did here. Again, it seemed to be too condensed for me. I would have liked to have seen it played out over a longer period. And if I'm totally honest, I wish Gerald Crane hadn't been shot. I would have loved to have seen that interaction between him and Jonathan more, because I actually think that's where Jonathan was getting his neurosis from. That, no, Dad, you're the one with the problem. Calm down. I don't have the same fears as you. I'm kind of scared by what you're doing. Like, there was a really interesting relationship there.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that's gone. I'd love to have seen him, Gerald Crane, get put into Arkham, say. And then Jonathan maybe recovers or something. Or doesn't even get injected like that, but you have the Scarecrow motif. Goes and visits him. You see a few of those. Then you have a classic Arkham breakout where Gerald escapes with other inmates, comes to Jonathan, and maybe then you get the overdose and the continuation of that experimentation, or you could do it in a whole range of different ways. I mean, I'm just kind of really here, just off the top of my head, saying, "Oh, maybe they could have done it like this," but ultimately, I wish it had just been drawn out a bit longer, and I wish Gerald had survived. Actually.
Yeah, it's probably my big kind of down point for the episode. I do have this isn't one of my main points, but one of my big down points for the episode is, regardless, this is quite an intelligent man. He's a doctor of biology, quite an intelligent man who, yes, he's injected himself with the toxin to cure himself of fear, but when he starts shouting at Jim and Harvey that he's not afraid, he's not scared of their bullets, and then they shoot him and kill him, he kind of should have been scared of their bullets. He's an intelligent man to know that a piece of metal shot at high velocity into your body will kill you, regardless of what the toxin's done to him.
Exactly.
It's not fear, it's idiot toxin, right?
Exactly. Like, it cured him of his fear, and it didn't remove his common sense.
Yes.
And I think that was a crazy line put in there. You know, you have this quite calculating man who is, you know, has thought a lot about how he can harvest adrenal glands at the height of them producing, you know, cortisol or whatever it is that causes that fear response, the fight or flight response. Yeah. And all of a sudden, then, I'm not afraid of your guns. And I mean, it's just I think it's a lazy line, to be honest. And I mean, he's still a clever guy. Yeah. He's still a doctor of biology. He hasn't lost his common sense, and he hasn't lost his reasoning that bullets will kill you. Yeah. It's not about fear. You don't have to be afraid, but you do have to realize that. But maybe that was the point as well.
I was thinking, yeah, there is kind of two options for the line in my head. It's either he's not afraid of their bullets because his legacy will live on now that he's given the toxin to Jonathan, or that he's not afraid to die because he's now happy with, I suppose, happy that he wasn't the one responsible for his wife's death, that fear is gone from him. But that wasn't said. The line that was said was, I'm not afraid of your bullets, you know, and that's a silly line from a very intelligent man.
And maybe there was a third one, that it's removed his fear to such a great extent that he is just walking at them. But the line just seems sloppy, and seems out of context with who that man is, being a biology teacher. And as I say, it removed his fear, it inoculated him against fear. It didn't remove his common sense or reasoning.
Yeah. All right, with that, I'm going to go on to my second point.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to be a short one. Because it is connected quite heavily with Gerald Crane. The concept of fear as an evolutionary fault, I think, is a fantastic concept. I don't know, it's something I'm always intrigued by science and how scientists will work out a problem and work towards a solution. But I love this concept for the biology instructor or biology teacher who's decided that what he wants to fix is the evolutionary fault in human beings, that we've created fear as a mechanism to deal with difficult situations. And he wants to create a cure for this evolutionary fault. I think that's a really interesting concept, or an interesting idea that the writers have come up with for this episode. Personally, I just think I don't know, it stood out to me as something really interesting that someone would have this idea.
Maybe that's why ultimately he did walk towards Jim and Harvey with a rain of bullets coming down on him, is because the fear, that idea of do you fight or do you flee, had been removed from him by his injections. Yeah. And maybe that's where the writers were coming from with that previous line. But again, that whole idea of fear, just the whole idea of harvesting, being able to harvest fear from the adrenal glands, is a really good, I think, mechanism and storytelling mechanism for the Cranes and for the Scarecrow. It's a really, really good idea. Yeah. It's really like, when people inject themselves with adrenaline, and it elevates the heartbeat and so on, and helps to sort of resuscitate you almost and make you more heightened. I really did like that idea, certainly. Yeah.
No, that's my second point. John, what's yours?
My second point was then it's the Falcone and Moroney trade, really, in Oswald, and how they went about doing this. And primarily because I think there's a really good line here that just showed that these two men still underestimate Oswald Cobblepot. Yeah. They still underestimate the Penguin. And it was all this kind of idea that, despite this, they do view him as being an asset. It's that Moroney sees him as an asset that has been lost to him, a prime asset, is what Moroney describes Oswald as, that he's lost him, and what he thought he was providing to him. I mean, remember only a few episodes ago he was the golden goose, honk honk, and now he's been betrayed. Falcone, obviously trading with Moroney to keep him alive, just shows you what value he puts on Oswald Cobblepot. Yet they continue to underestimate who he is, what he's about, and what he's doing. Falcone, I think, he knows his place in life. He knows he's clever. a freakish little man like him will never be the boss. And he comes out with these lines. And again, it's pure underestimation of this character. And I think despite where he's come from being the umbrella boy for Fish in the first episode, there is still all of this, in a sense, disrespect that Oswald is getting, and even just Jim's refusal to take Oswald's invitation is probably seen as a slight by Oswald. And he's still subject to all of this, and I think it really came out in this trade-off between Maroni and Falcone.
Yeah, it's a really nice little call-out. I think just you've made the big point, in a city as Gotham is right now in this TV show, at the time that it's taking place, freakish little men like Penguin will not be leaders of the families of mafia. But in the time of Batman, freakish people will be taking over the city and be segmenting it up amongst themselves. That's the whole purpose of this show. If you thought the show didn't center around the Penguin and didn't center around his story, it absolutely does. And Falcone's just called that out and said, this freakish little man right now will not lead our gangs. He will be a second in command. He will give us all the information. He's a very intelligent person, but he will not take over from us right now in this version of Gotham.
Yeah, and the other thing I liked about this was just the whole Falcone and Maroni. It was proper sort of Godfather Italian dons, walking around this lovely mansion that Falcone has.
Gorgeous building, isn't it?
Yeah, the inside of it, amazing. It's all refined and pristine, and then it really comes down to the nitty gritty and the dirty sort of business of it all. And there you see Judge Turnbull, who's being used as the trading card by Falcone to bring Maroni around to so that he doesn't go after and kill Oswald. That they're there, and he's probably, poor Judge Turnbull is gonna probably never be seen again.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one, because he does call it out. Maroni wants his head on a plate. That's what he wants. Falcone once again is taking the smarter route. I think, and maybe I'm wrong, you can correct me if you don't agree, but it feels like Falcone is actually saying, do you know what would be even better? We've just stolen this guy who was out on a date with a young man. We've stolen him. We've got video footage of him now being in an S&M situation, I guess.
Yeah.
We're now going to be able to use this guy who's known as being a pit bull of a judge who puts away criminals. We're going to be able to use him now because we've got something on him, I think. I think Falcone's decision is to keep him alive, not to kill him, and now to have something to hang over him and blackmail him for things that they want him to do, to get some of Maroni's men off or get some of Falcone's men off.
Kind of like Judge Bam Bam, who will simply put all the stamps and sign these warrants for corrupt members of the G.C.P.D. Falcone and Maroni, in a sense, now have got enough rope to hang this guy with if he ever decides to go and become that pit bull towards them again. They can show the footage. I mean, the lady in the leather, the ladies of the leather, she just say smile at the camera. The photo's taken. It's all there.
She's certainly not a lady, though.
She's certainly not. And they have him owned, and he's another piece in their power jigsaw around the institutions of Gotham.
Yeah, I do like the delight of Maroni when he realizes what Falcone is arranging. He seems absolutely overjoyed that Falcone is this evil, I suppose, in a way.
And I think then that all comes to a head with maybe a bit of a premonition or a bit of a prediction for the future, where Maroni comes into the club right at the end, where Fish's old club has Oswald Cobblepot pour out a glass of champagne for him. This is Oswald's big opening, and he just kind of quietly and threateningly, as the champagne is poured out, as it begins to spill out over the edge, to say, I won't come after you, but you better hope that Falcone lives a long, healthy life, because as soon as he's gone, you're out the picture as well. Such a great threat. True to a T to Maroni as a character, who's just really, violence is his first name, really.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Really good. And again, John Doman, David Zayas, really, really good as these two big heavyweights in Gotham.
Yeah.
Love them every time they're on the screen. I absolutely love them.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I do like the threat, as you say, to Oswald, because it's really calling out the fact Maroni doesn't have a deal with Oswald. There's no deal here to keep Cobblepot alive. The deal is with Falcone. It's not with Cobblepot. The minute Falcone's gone, so's Oswald. Nothing's changed between the two of them, but he's now accepted that he has a deal for protection with Maroni. So yeah, great scene. Really, really enjoyed it.
So then, what's your third case point?
My third point, and I think I might probably be stealing one from you, because I think everybody who watched this episode has to have loved this scene, which is Oswald and Ed meet for the first time.
It does. I think this is where our 2 points combine. May the power of case points combine.
We're going to play the meeting for you right now.
Can I help you?
I don't think so. Can you?
What do you want?
What I want, the poor have, the rich need, and if you eat it, you'll die.
Are you asking me a riddle?
Do you like riddles?
No.
So do you give up?
Friend, look at...
Nothing. The answer is nothing. The poor have it, the rich need it, and if you eat it...
Who are you?
Edward. Enigma. I know who you are.
Then you know that you're standing too close.
Did you know that male emperor penguins keep their eggs warm by balancing them on their feet? Isn't that neat?
Nice to meet you, sir. Keep moving.
Will do.
Such a great scene. Such a great scene.
Really, really well played, I thought. Some great interaction between these two master criminals, in a sense. Or at least one of them a future master criminal.
Yeah, well, one of them's just had his first victim last week in episode 14, so pretty likely that they're on the same path. But having the two of them meet together is great. I love that I suppose the kind of inquisitive nature of Ed Nigma. When he sees Oswald in the G.C.P.D, he cannot help but follow him and talk to him. He's getting his opportunity finally to meet and talk to the Penguin. You know, he seems genuinely excited. I love the two riddles that he poses. One is, "What do I want from you?" Nothing. And the other one is not really a riddle, I suppose. It's
about the Emperor Penguin and balancing the male balances the eggs on his feet to protect them from the cold. Fascinating.
yeah, really good. But again, love the reaction from Oswald as you heard in the clip there, which is basically, "You know who I am, and you're standing too close to me." Hello, sir. Nice to meet you. Walk away. Yeah, really good.
I just think how it plays out was really well captured in the scene. I think it's really an iconic meeting, and throughout the whole of it, the sense that the two of them somehow can sense that they're similar but different as well is really well played. That, you know, they are cut from the same cloth, but one is in the G.C.P.D and maybe is hiding it better than another one who is on the other side of the fence with the mobsters, but again is hiding something within the organization that he's in. There's these two people hiding bits about themselves in the organization that they're working in. One on the right side of the law, the other on the wrong side. And I loved that. I loved how the whole scene was captured, this sense of knowing one another and a shared understanding of who the other is. I thought was excellent. I just thought it was so well played between these two characters who, again, are superb. Again, another two members of the cast that every time they're on screen, I just want to see what they do. And I think Corey Michael Smith has just, over the course of the season so far, he is getting better and better and better. And to me, he is just a perfect Riddler.
Yeah, these last three episodes particularly have been really, really good. His relationship with Christine Kringle has been great. The severed body parts to get rid of the medical examiner that we talked about last week, it's fantastic. And this scene here is great, just to have the meeting of the two of them. And I love the reaction from Oswald again. Makes it feel like he now knows who Ed is. And if Ed can do something for him in the future, they may be friends. But right now, this guy can't do anything for him. He's just a creepy guy who asks riddles, essentially, to Oswald. And he treats him as such. Walk away. Don't deal with me anymore. I don't want to deal with you anymore. You're creeping me out. Step away from me.
I mean, just a quick side note on Ed Nigma. Like, he has that great line again with Jim and Harvey in the room where he says, the new medical examiner, Jim's girlfriend, she smells nice. And Harvey comes out with this great line as well. You see competition already, this idea that he likes her. And we've mentioned this before. She has an interesting phrase as well, which is fascinating as well. So maybe the two of them now are getting into closer proximity. Will something happen here? I think it would go against the comic book canon, I think. But nonetheless, I like the two of them being together. But he likes her. He likes her. It's not the same relationship as was with the former medical examiner. So I love that. But again, creepy. She smells nice.
Oh yeah. Always good. That was my third point. John, do you have anything more on Ed and Oswald? Or
no, I was exactly the same point. Really, it was that meeting of the master criminals in the G.C.P.D. It was such a well played scene and done so well that I think we've covered that point as well. So I suppose I can go on to my fourth case point, really, and this is Alfred and Bruce. And the bonding. There's a kind of a fatherly son or guardian son bonding coming here. We go from the young Bruce Wayne wanting to continue some of the traditions that he'd done with his father previously, where they had gone out once a year, hiking in the mountains and the hills around Wayne Manor and Gotham to see sunrise and to camp out and to really have a father-son kind of bonding exercise, and he does not want Alfred to come with him. He still sees it as exclusively for him and his dad. And then you see the whole emotional response to being there, finally confronted with the cairns, the stones that they'd placed on top of the hill, him and his dad in the past. And that emotional response from the young Bruce Wayne to that. And then eventually, he has his accident and he's stranded out in the wilderness, in the countryside, and Alfred comes and helps him in a way, not physically or directly, but he's there. He's just there for him. He doesn't help him up the side of the hill after Bruce has bound his leg and has struggled his way back up to the top of the hill to try and get back to Wayne Manor. He hasn't done any of that. He hasn't called the police or a search party. He simply knows where to go, and he's waited for him. And when he's there, they've just clicked together, and you go from then Bruce taking on board and realizing there, I think, that Alfred is his new father, or at least not a replacement father, but is the guardian that he needs right now.
Yeah, love this scene, particularly the element between Alfred and Bruce, where Alfred really teaches him strength. He's becoming more of a kind of a mix of a friend, a father, and a mentor. They're all three different pieces, I suppose, of Alfred. It is about teaching him strength, giving him a cup of tea, obviously, always important for a British butler to do that. But I love the moment when Bruce comes up and goes, "This is hell out here." And Alfred says to him that, this is better than 99% of the places where I used to sleep. This is cushy in comparison. A great little moment between the two of them. But David Mazouz in the scene where he had that moment of realization that he doesn't have a father anymore. He can never do this anymore. He can never climb up the mountain with a stone and plant it in the same place that he used to do every year with his father. I think it's heartbreaking. And David Mazouz, again, does a great job with that scene.
He's got great emotional range. He really, really does. Yeah. Such a great young actor, I think. And it's something that Sean Pertwee has said as well in our interview that we did with him. in the podcast interview that we did.
Yeah.
I think as well, Alfred's lines when Bruce finally comes up over the hill and the campfire is roaring, the look on Alfred's face, I think the really good exchange. I think that here's a few here.
Hello there, Master Bruce. Well, you certainly took your time. What, did you stop off for a pint on the way up, did you?
How long have you been there?
Well, I don't know, about an hour. Just when you started climbing up that really nasty hill.
Well, thanks for your help.
Yeah, I never got you down there, did I? Come here.
I'm cold. I'm tired and my ankle's sprained.
Oh,
I just want to go home.
you want to go home? Or do you want to wait and watch the sunrise? Like you did with your dad?
Well, Alfred, you can only stay if you think you can handle it.
If I can handle it. Mate, this place is positively cushy compared to some of the places I've slept at. Cup of tea, you cheeky monkey.
It's just really sarcastic, and but in a nice way. It's kind of it's what took you so long, you know? You stop off for a pint halfway up and a pie, you know? Real, just really nice, warm words of harsh comfort. I think it's kind of like doesn't help him, but he doesn't tell him to sort of whinge or complain. It's kind of just to get on with it, and it's something I can really relate to. I think from Alfred, I think it's such a great relationship that they have, as you say.
Yeah, really good. I guess it's on to my fourth case point. Big one for me this week, because I had no idea how they were going to do this character, Fish Mooney. This storyline with Fish is fab, I think, this week. As I say, I didn't have any idea what they were going to do with her. Last week we ended with her about to be attacked on a boat. I thought it was going to be a friend of hers. I thought it was going to be somebody that she was running in, and then would be a big hug, and it would be where she was actually intending to go to and intended to stay while she was away from Gotham. Turns out she's been captured. We don't know by who yet. But I love how in this episode it shows her steps to becoming a leader again, and done quite quickly. You know, she wakes up, two guys are standing over her, about to, I presume the intention here is to rape her, or to beat her at least, to take ownership of her as their partner. And she's told that essentially the first person that attacks a woman is killed very quickly by the second person that attacks a woman. That's what happens in this underground hell, essentially. So Fish stands up, walks over to them and says, "The first one of you to attack me will die like that. The second one that to attack me will die slowly." Once again, you have Fish Mooney asserting her power and showing how powerful a character she is and can be. You know, anybody in that situation, if I was faced in that situation, no matter how strong I think I am, I think I would probably be cowering in a corner. I wouldn't be standing up for myself like she does. And I think throughout the whole episode, every time it comes back to Fish, I'm really interested to see what's happening with her. And by the end of this episode, she's taken over. She now owns every person that's in that prison or in that basement or whatever it is. They're all now working for Fish. They are all doing what she's telling them to do. Now they're organized. Now they can do something. And the episode ends out with a person being thrown back in with no eyes, essentially. So we have no idea what's going on. We don't know who's in control of this place. But I think it's a fascinating little element for Fish that she's got her own story completely away from Gotham now that I didn't expect her to have.
No, definitely. I mean, I think, again, it's really good character development for Fish. I mean, we saw her character sort of mixing it in with the mobsters, you know, up till the end of season 10. I think since then, we've seen her true metal, you know, where we've said this previously, you know, she was tortured. We've seen her on the run. Mm-hmm. She's constantly got fire in her ability to come on and bounce back immediately. And I think this is a really good character development of her. So I agree with you. I really like everything I've seen here. The main thing, there's still some unanswered questions, which I presume will come out later on in some of the future episodes. You know, who attacked the ship? Where are they at the moment? Yeah. Who is in charge of this facility? Mm-hmm. At the moment, these are questions that we don't have the answer to.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they will come out eventually. So there's still a lot of intrigue there then around this new situation that Fish finds herself in, which is great.
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with that. And I think this is one of the points I'd had about some of the earlier episodes. I don't need answers to questions that are posed every single episode. It kind of led to the problem that you had earlier on with Jonathan Crane, where you got an answer to how he becomes the Scarecrow in a very quick scene of, probably about a minute of the episode is how he becomes the Scarecrow. If that had been played out over a couple of episodes, it would have been better for you. In the same way here, where we've got Fish, we now know something's happening with her. We now know she's been captured, and we now know that she's become a leader of this group who are in captivity, I presume. But let's have that play out over 5 or 6 episodes, or 3 or 4 episodes. Let's see what happens and who's behind it over the course of a couple of episodes. So I'm hoping there is much more depth given in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and definitely don't blink when you're around Fish. I mean, that shift to the neck to Mace, who was the apparent leader of this group of people in the basement, really just out of the blue, quick fire. Blink and you missed it. Love that. Absolutely and totally brutal and efficient in what she wants to achieve and when she wants to do it.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Fantastic stuff. And that's my 4th point. John, have you got a 5th?
I do have a 5th, and it's a short point. It's the club. We see a rebranding of Fish's Club. Away goes the Fish, which I did like the neon sign of that. I thought that was a really cool neon sign, the image of the sort of eaten fish with the bones and so on. I thought that was really good, but replaced by an umbrella, and the club being called Oswald's and not the Iceberg Lounge. So this is an interesting development for me that it's been called Oswald's, and we have an umbrella now. It also seems to have taken a slight change in direction as well. I did see a lot of punk people in there instead of the usual kind of jazz hands type of people. From
jazz hands or jazz fans? The
jazz fans and the jazz hands. You always get jazz hands with jazz and jazz fans.
Yeah.
It was an interesting tack. Part of me wishes it was the Iceberg Lounge, but maybe that is a bit too soon. So I presume that this is going to fail as a club, the new rebranding. First of all, it's got an umbrella neon sign, which I like the motif, but will that work? It's obviously not attracting the same clientele.
With the punks now,
the punks
and they're
now
playing
instead of the the jazz fans.
Yeah. And they're playing the Stranglers song, the cover version of the Stranglers song, No More Heroes Anymore is in there.
Exactly. And I think, Falcone was quite clear that that club made money, and that money helped gain influence, and that influence ultimately leads to maintaining control. And this seems to me that for an opening night or a grand reopening, the club is not that packed. Jim certainly wasn't there. We've seen that. And it gets gate crashed by Maroney, who kind of really is fairly threatening in the middle of the club, which surely would scare away punters. So I have a feeling that this club is going to fail, and it might not be around by the end of this season. And maybe it's recalled Iceberg Lounge. I hope it does become Iceberg Lounge in future episodes, or maybe for next season at some point, but I do think it will ultimately change from being this new club or called Oswald's as well, which just sounds like a real diner.
Yeah, it does. And one of the big things, I presume, and again, we don't know the backstory of Fish, but I presume the reason why Fish's Club is known as Fish's is because she's quite a well-known character in the underground. She's quite a well-known person for all of her dealings that she has. Oswald's not a well-known person. He's always he's been in the background. He's been pulling the strings, in a sense, for a lot of people. But you can't name a club after that, Oswald's not exactly the most attractive name for a club. No offense to any Oswalds that may be listening. But that particular name won't work. As you say, the style, having punks in the bar dancing to the Stranglers isn't usually conducive to a good evening out, sitting around drinking some cocktails and drinking some champagne. So it won't work in its current format. So I wonder what will happen. I'm not sure if it's going to fail. I think Oswald does have some knowledge in running a business, so we'll see how it goes. But maybe it'll get retooled and, as you say, become the Iceberg Lounge.
Hopefully. So, Derek, what's your fifth point?
My final point is about Jim and Leslie Tompkins. Jim Gordon and Leslie Tompkins. I'm loving their relationship. The patter between the two of them when they just come back from their third date, isn't it?
Yeah, 3 dates, Jim and Leslie.
Yeah, just the patter between the two of them when they're having their discussion, about where Jim says, "I haven't been to your apartment yet," and Leslie says, "What particular room in my apartment are you interested in?" And then they go back and forth on the kitchen, it's too small, the sitting room, it's too dark, the bedroom, oh, you'd like the bedroom, but not this time, I've got a new job tomorrow. I love that conversation between the two of them. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think she also says, and just throws in the line, no case notes this time. Like, just really nice.
He says that, yeah. He's learning.
It's a really good little nod to the previous episode. It's a really good kind of bit of sort of banter between the two of them and intimacy between the two of them. Which I think is really good as well. But then it all seems to get a bit awkward, I think.
A little bit.
From Jim's point. Like, he doesn't like that cocktail mix of romance and their work relationship. He suddenly kind of seems to put on the brakes a bit, or just the barrier goes up, at least in the G.C.P.D. That, don't touch me. And I do quite like Harvey's little response as well.
Harvey is hilarious. He's just his needling of Jim again, like he did it the whole time when Jim was with Barbara. He was constantly needling him, going, "She's way too high maintenance for you. You'll never keep a girl like that." Now he's with Leslie and he's going, "Oh, now she's in the office working with you. You're never going to keep her. That's the worst thing to happen. It's going to end in tears, And it's getting to Jim this time because he can't get away from both Leslie and Harvey. They're connected now all the time. So quite an interesting relationship this time, I think. But I love the two of them together. I think it's great. And I think, we've talked about it before. We talked about Barbara and Jim's relationship, something that, some fans aren't hugely happy with their relationship and how Barbara particularly has been portrayed in the show, and we've talked about how she's been portrayed in the show. Yeah. One of the big difficulties here is you never got to see Jim and Barbara getting together and learning why they liked each other and learning why they fell for each other. You saw them mid-relationship and never really got any more than that, saw it go downhill, really. It was a very simply drawn character, very simply drawn relationship in the fact that, it showed the two of them in love and then fall out of love, and that's it. So they have the opportunity here with Leslie Tompkins to show the reason why Jim would fall for her. Number one, she looks like Marina Baccarin, so that's a good starter for 10, really. Secondly, she's a good laugh. She has fun with him. She's really interested in the type of work that he does. She comes from a similar background to him. She's worked in a similar type of company as him. So you see the two of them really build up the relationship. So again, regardless of her being, as I called her before, nerd gold, that actress who plays Leslie Tompkins, regardless of her being nerd gold, she's also got some great characteristics that match Jim Gordon, whereas Barbara never got that opportunity or was never shown to have those characteristics that would match him other than being an attractive woman.
Yeah, no, exactly. It definitely as well, I think, adds some context to Jim and Barbara's relationship as well. It adds that kind of context as to why their relationship didn't work as well, because you didn't see this, as you say. It was almost like maybe it had gotten stale. I mean, it's things that you infer from how he behaves around Leslie Tompkins, but nonetheless, it helps to add that context then to that previous relationship. And so I think that adds then a bit more depth to it, which you didn't unfortunately get at the time. And again, we have another prediction here in the show. As Harvey says, office romances always end in disaster. Yeah. So is the writing on the wall for Jim and Leslie now that she's started as the medical examiner in the precinct? Yeah, and that it's going to come to some dreadful and devastating end, whether at the hands of the mobster or whether it's just because office romances don't work out.
Yeah, or at the hands of Enigma, who could be becoming very jealous of Jim for the woman who smells nice.
Well, exactly.
That's my fifth point. John, have you got any other points or any other notes on the episode?
I think my main note that I have really is I thought we were going to see or catch a glimpse of a possible Batcave. When David Mazouz fell down the hill, I actually did think that he was going to find refuge in a cave, or he was going to maybe fall down into a sort of a sinkhole that would feed into then the caves that go under the Wayne Manor estate. So I thought that was where we were maybe just going to get a little Easter egg of the Batcave. Now, it didn't happen, but
given that it's Easter, it would have been great for that too.
It would have been yummy.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. It didn't really cross my mind, but I absolutely see what you mean. I think possibly just the scene, as I said, just before he falls, which I thought was quite an emotional scene that David Mazouz played, where he again realizes he doesn't have a father to do this kind of activity with, and is angry at his father for leaving. Really, that's the real. A real Bruce Wayne moment. If you're disappointed in something not happening, you get angry. You know, that's basically it. And then he falls down the hill. Maybe there wasn't that moment of pause. Maybe I just didn't notice it. But yeah, now that you bring it up, it would have been a really interesting touch. We hopefully at some point we will get him falling down a well and getting surrounded by bats, or as you say, falling into a cave that is the opening to the Batcave. Something that would have a bigger connection to the Batman side.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't even need to have bats for me. Mm-hmm. I would have been more than happy if he just sought refuge from inclement weather or something like that, in this cave, which could possibly have been the start of maybe the young Bruce Wayne exploring these caves as a young kid. Mm-hmm. And then as he gets further and further in or into a new section of the cave, he comes across bats, maybe in a season 2 or a season 3 thing or something like that. Yeah. You don't need to have bats straight up front there immediately. But I just thought, wouldn't that have been a nice little touch to have sort of introduced the caves under Wayne Manor at this moment in time. But it didn't happen, and that's fine as well. It was just a little thing that kind of sprung into my mind after the episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, interesting. A couple of tiny notes for me. I did mention earlier on the great Strangler song that's used in this episode, No More Heroes. I think that's partially to do with the fact that Oswald, a villain, is starting to take over. He's starting to become bigger in the city of Gotham. A lot of the heroes are gone. There are no more heroes anymore in Gotham. There's loads of villains, essentially. So I thought that was an interesting choice for a song. It will be our outro to this episode because I love it. The one other one. Did you notice the final bit of interaction between Leslie and Jim in this episode? That Leslie bought tickets to the circus. And what lives in circuses, John?
The Flying Graysons,
yes,
I believe.
And clowns. And possibly jokers. So
Mm.
there's my Joker watch for this week. All right, just had to play the theme again because we haven't played it in a couple of weeks. But yeah, they're going off to the circus potentially to see some clowns and some flying Graysons.
And we do know from our Joker Watch special that the Joker turns up in the form of Jerome in the next episode.
Yes, that's going to be really interesting. So that's the next episode, The Blind Fortune Teller, episode 16 of Gotham, which we'll be returning for next week.
So with that, on to our feedback.
Fascinating.
So our first bit of feedback this week comes from John de Gruyther on Twitter. He says, "Nice show, guys, a Gotham TV podcast. I've been enjoying it on my way to work in the morning. Just delving into the back catalogue of episodes." Thanks very much, John. Always good to hear from a listener.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's nice to hear that people are enjoying it all the time. So that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and just a note for anybody who isn't listening to some of our back episodes. Some of the stuff that we have covered before the show started, we covered the 3 Nolan films. We covered Batman Year One. We covered a bunch of comics as well. We covered Gotham Central, which I absolutely love as a spoiler for some of our reviews, but really, really enjoyable. I know you really enjoyed them as well, John.
Yeah, we've looked at in the downtime between episode 10 and episode 11 here in Ireland. In 2 podcasts, we have looked at Hush by Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee, which is a great story arc there as well. So we have plenty of other episodes in our back catalogue if you want to listen to them. We also have obviously got our interviews as well from New York Comic Con in October last year, but also our interviews with Victoria Cartagena and Andrew Stewart-Jones, who play Rene Montoya and Christopher Allen, and also then our round table with those 2 members of the cast of Gotham and with our friends from Legends of Gotham, and then also our recent interview with Sean Pertwee, who plays Alfred, which was a great interview. It was really good fun speaking with him and chatting with him whilst we were doing that. So more than welcome to check out those podcasts. So thank you, John, for the comment. It was really, really nice. Thank you. So another piece of feedback we have received comes from Daniel, Detective Daniel Butcher. He says, "Hello, detectives." Hello there, detective. I hope you're doing fine and well over this Easter. He goes, "I continue to love the awkward romance between Gordon and Tompkins. Does this mean that Barbara and Jim are officially allowed to see other people? And where is Jim sleeping? Does he have another apartment?" He also goes on to say, "This was probably one of my favourite supervillain arcs in a while. For once, it was the creepies and not the Gotham underworld that kept my attention." I think it's important here just to quickly mention, Daniel is talking about the Scarecrow arc in terms of both episodes here, not just one or the other of the 2 episodes. And finally, it goes, "So Bruce Wayne uses a bat because it scares him. Is Johnny Crane as an adult doing the same thing, using what terrifies him to control others?" From Agent Daniel, obviously from Welcome to Level 7. Yeah. Really interesting points. It's certainly something that I kind of noticed, this idea that maybe he uses what scares him to scare other people and to use it as his motif in the same way that Bruce Wayne uses the bat. So that's a really good point. I think it's interesting to see that similarity has also been picked out by other people as well, definitely.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we're on the same page really as Daniel on this point. Where's Jim sleeping? I think he's sleeping at the G.C.P.D, isn't he? Isn't that what that's they called out when Leslie bumps into him after his shower when he's wearing his wife beater, as he calls it himself.
His OC white vest.
His OC white vest, yeah. I think he's sleeping at the G.C.P.D, so, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's still sleeping at the G.C.P.D. He's certainly handed in the keys to Barbara's apartment into the fruit bowl. Yeah. And we kind of are aware he hasn't been back to Leslie Tompkins for a night of passion just yet.
Yes.
So I think he's still sleeping in the locker room.
Yeah, but I guess that's a pretty good point. Maybe that's the reason why he's so excited to see her apartment, because he just wants somewhere to sleep other than the G.C.P.D. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, exactly. And then I would suspect then Barbara and Jim are officially allowed to see other people.
Yeah.
Jim certainly is doing that anyway.
That's true. I think once you hand back your keys to your apartment, you're probably broken up then, aren't you?
Yeah. And
are they just on a break?
I think they're broken up. And Barbara, of course, as far as we're aware, is only really seeing her parents at the moment.
That's true.
You know? And then, I agree, I think this is a really good villain arc for this episode. I do, again, just wish it had been drawn out a bit further. Certainly because I really like the Scarecrow. I think with having him as sort of a central and consistent theme throughout the Dark Knight trilogy, it's one of the characters or villains of Batman that probably more recently has had a higher profile, along with Bane and Joker and Ra's al Ghul as such, because of that mainstream use within the Dark Knight trilogy. So I was really pleased to see that they were looking at his origins and his genesis, but I would just wish it had been a bit drawn out, which is weird to say given it was a 2-parter, of course. But...
Yeah. Thanks again for your feedback, Daniel. Good to hear from you as always.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much, Daniel.
And with that, on to the news.
in a shock news item, we have actual news. We've not had news for a while now. This is DC connected news to do with the TV show Preacher, based on the Vertigo Comics imprint, which is part of DC, and hence why we're covering it here. But there has been some casting news there for Preacher. So we have 2 Misfits alumni actually in being cast in Preacher. One, Joseph Gilgun, who will play the Irish vampire Cassidy, and Ruth Negga, who will play Tulip O'Hara, who is currently, we see, as an Inhuman in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Spoilers.
Spoilers for anyone who hasn't been watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But look, really good casting there. I particularly like Joseph Gilgun. He is also an alumni of Chorley in Lancashire, which is very close to where I was born and brought up in Ormskirk. So, plus, big fan of Misfits, at least, you know. And he has great comedy moments in the episodes that he played. I can't remember the character's name, but his time in Misfits was towards the later series, and he had some really good sort of deadpan, dry comedy moments, which I think will work really well for Cassidy. To be honest, should be really interesting to see. I wonder whether he's a fan of Chorley FM as well.
maybe we are not going to say their call sign here, John. But Ruth Negga as well is a fantastic actress. I've loved her in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Anybody who's listened to the Welcome to Level 7 podcast, our friends over there, anybody who's watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. will know how good Ruth Negga's character is in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
The girl with the flowery dress.
Yes. Fantastic character, fantastic actress, and really looking forward to it. Hails from Ethiopian Irish descent, so she's lived in Limerick in Ireland for most of her life. And she was also in a bunch of Irish shows, like Love Hate, which is a fantastic, really brutal, violent show, but a really good show. If you haven't seen it, check it out. And she was also in Breakfast on Pluto with another Scarecrow, Cillian Murphy, who was in Christopher Nolan's films, playing the Scarecrow character. Played in all 3 of Christopher Nolan's Batman films.
Yeah. And Cillian Murphy is also doing a great turn in Peaky Blinders, which is a BBC show about gangsters in and around Birmingham in sort of the 1920s, 1930s, just after the First World War. Really good. There is also Bane in that as well, so there's a real Batman alumni coming out of that.
But
slightly drifting off point, I know, yeah.
But back to Preacher. If you don't know anything about Preacher, it's a really interesting book. It's about a character called Jesse Custer who gets possessed by Genesis and has the ability to make anybody do what he wants them to do. The main core cast that he's going to be hanging around with in the show are Tulip O'Hare, played by Ruth Negga, and Cassidy, an Irish vampire, played by Joseph Gilgun, as John mentioned. So really, really intrigued to watch this show. It's got much more of a vibe about a battle against God. There's a lot of.
So it feels almost like a Western. I mean, you read the comics, it's almost like the outlaws on the run from the sheriff to an extent. You get that kind of vibe, but it's all from a sort of a supernatural type of place, I think.
Yeah, and this time the sheriff is God.
Exactly. Yeah. Also, there is Ian Coletti as well, has also been cast as one of the more unfortunately turned members or characters within the book, who has a gunshot to the face, doesn't he? Which causes him to be given a certain nickname, which means he could always have bad breath.
Potentially. We are, unfortunately, because this is an all-ages show, we're not going to share his name on this particular podcast, but you can search it up on IMDb. Ian Coletti is playing the character with the unfortunate name, and I do feel sorry for him when his casting agent called him up and said, "You've got the part of..." But
I wonder whether we need to change up our age appropriateness. Given we've been talking about essentially drug taking in this episode, there is the talk of, there's quite a lot of violence in Gotham. It is relatively adult themes being discussed here.
Yeah, well,
Me feels.
Once Gotham gets an adult rating, perhaps maybe that will be something that will come next season. But once it does, potentially we'll change up the rating of our show. But while we have at the moment, and while we tell iTunes that we are an all ages podcast, there are certain words we will not be able to use on this podcast. We will be able to use them on the Daredevil podcast because that's a PG podcast. So follow us on defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes to hear a slightly more adult version of the show. So we got a bit of news from WonderCon, which happened this weekend in the US. Featured some of the cast members, including Ben McKenzie, Robin Lord Taylor, Corey Michael Smith, and also one of the showrunners, John Stevens, who's written a bunch of episodes for this season of Gotham. And they talked about some revelations for season 2, didn't they?
They certainly did. I mean, they listed off a good number of new introductions that we can hopefully look forward to in season 2, including 2 of my favourites. Certainly, I love the Mad Hatter, and that was dropped within the panel at WonderCon. And part of me actually thinks that would be a nice little addition to the whole story arc surrounding Enigma and the development of the Riddler. Because for me, I find them kind of from the same songbook, really. They're that kind of they deal in riddles and puzzles and so on, and I find that would be an interesting little face-off between those two.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting character to bring in. Mad Hatter controls people by developing hats that have a control device inside the hat, isn't it? That's the basic modus operandi of the character. But it's a bit of an interesting one to bring in. What John Stevens talked about was that they want to bring in Clayface and Mad Hatter. They're both villains that we're going to bring in season 2. They both have great backstories and great personalities. Clayface especially is a character I want to explore the origin of. Now, Clayface is a character that can mold himself to look like anybody else in the comic books. We've talked about him a couple of times in things like Hush and in Gotham Central, I believe he was in there. But I don't know, it's a bit of an odd character to be in Gotham. Gotham's a very real, grounded show.
I suppose with both of them, though, it is this idea of to what extent will they bring in the more fantastical elements. I mean, I can see that Mad Hatter could work. I mean, you could even say the controlling device could be pheromones in some kind of way. You can always ground it, I think. It could even be Clayface, could be a master of disguise. I mean, almost that kind of thing. I mean, there's ways of grounding the thing and the characters, but also maybe then this becomes another step up. I mean, we have coming from Falcone and Maroni this whole idea that, chaos is coming, we need to be grounded sort of criminals to an extent, and without organized crime and the police, they don't have a business. And you've got this next step of Oswald Cobblepot, and then maybe the likes of Mad Hatter and Clayface represent this further escalation of this craziness that starts to get introduced into Gotham. Yeah. So it'd be interesting how they play that. I mean, still, it depends on how they want to develop the series, whether they're happy to go down those more fantastical avenues, or whether they want to ground it.
Yeah, or as you say, whether it's just something like the character of Clayface way before he becomes Clayface, and you get a little hint at the end of the episode as to who he may become. Yeah. Really interesting. The other person that they have talked about for the entirety of season 1 introducing, and they haven't introduced him yet, is Victor Freeze, Dr. Freeze, I guess. Yeah. So who's probably well known to a lot of viewers of Batman, the animated series, a lot of comic book readers, and some viewers of the Arnold Schwarzenegger version of the character in.
Yes, we should not talk about that.
Okay, we won't talk about that. But again, he's a doctor, he's a science villain, which they've played with quite a bit in season 1. And John Stevens says, having a science villain is quite an easy thing for the show to use. So you can play with a lot of his abilities without going into the world of superheroes, is his exact quote about it.
I think as well, it plays in quite nicely with the whole Wayne Enterprise aspect and the darker elements there, like we saw with Viper. Dr. Freeze has always been that he's been employed by Wayne Enterprises anyway in some of his stories, and he's also on the side done research that will ultimately help him with saving his wife. So he could be brought into the whole Wayne Enterprises, maybe darker elements that we saw in Viper, I think, which could be quite good as well. And then the other aspect that maybe links to these darker elements of the Wayne Enterprise board would be then the Court of Owls. That is something that was discussed as well with John Stevens on this panel as well.
Yeah, we've talked about it on the show a couple of times in the past. The Court of Owls is again a shadowy organisation that works within Gotham, controlling things from the background. Brought in very recently by Scott Snyder in the comic books. And again, we've kind of mentioned that there could be a possibility they could be behind people like Falcone, Moroni, and Wayne Enterprises. They could be controlling all of them behind the scenes, which is what the Court of Owls did. There is a very interesting portion of the story that Scott Snyder wrote where Bruce investigates the Court of Owls very early in his childhood, very around the age of 12 or 13. So a very good possibility that Bruce will go on an investigation into the Court of Owls and may not find anything, but could tie in quite well with season 2.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well from this panel at WonderCon, two of the other things that I thought were quite good, and I mean, I suppose spoilers here, but I don't really think so. I think we've discussed how potentially Enigma might have a transformatory moment and become the Riddler, or the start of becoming the Riddler. That was hinted at on the panel as well by Corey Michael Smith that towards the end of season 1 now, there is going to be a moment within one of the episodes where maybe you start to get that more definitive break in these personalities between Enigma and the Riddler and see that. So I'm looking forward to that because I really have enjoyed this long game with Enigma. Yeah. And then that Fish, Mooney, and Oswald are going to reunite towards the end of the season 1. Probably in the last 4 episodes at some point she will show up, and I can't wait to see how that will work out as well. And I think Robin Lord Taylor indicated how, Fish taught Oswald everything about Gotham. Yes, the relationship is fraught and dramatic, but he still recognizes her influence on him and respects that. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out as well. Yeah. I really am looking forward to those two elements towards the end of season 1.
Yeah,
as well.
Absolutely. And especially noting that Jada Pinkett Smith won't be returning for season 2 will be a very interesting meeting with...
will it result in a death?
Potentially.
Or an Arkham imprisonment?
Yeah, very much of interest. The last piece that John Stevens talked about for the show, he did reveal quite a lot. He was quite candid in this interview with WonderCon. And thanks very much to Collider.com for the article. We'll put up the actual article on our show notes. But one other thing that John Stevens did reveal is that we will start to see the other side of Bruce Wayne in season 2. The one element that we all know about Bruce Wayne is that he's a millionaire playboy or a billionaire playboy, and he creates that persona for himself, which is how everybody thinks of him in the city of Gotham. Right now he's just a young kid, but he will start to develop that persona and start to develop that side of him where he's using his money to show outwardly that he's just a carefree billionaire.
His other mask, effectively.
Yeah, exactly. So that'll be quite interesting to see the start of. I presume it won't be as deep as driving fast cars and hanging around with loads of supermodels because he's probably a bit young for that. But they, maybe he'll buy a circus or something next season. Something
possibly. But I also think that it would be great to see him with Tommy Elliott. That part of that development of this extra persona involves Tommy Elliott, and maybe some of the story of Bruce and Tommy Elliott as we saw in Hush. Obviously not the whole thing, but I think that would be a really good episode and a really good way of exploring Bruce Wayne's backstory and that dual persona maybe more, and that tie-in of Tommy Elliott and the fate of his own parents as well.
Bring Cole Vallis back. He was really good as well. So,
exactly.
Yeah. All right, that's it for the news, and that's it for everything from WonderCon.
But with that, you can also follow us for all things Gotham and the DC Connected Universe at gothamtvpodcast.com/iTunes. You can also find us on Stitcher, Player FM, and any other good podcast catcher for our podcasts that come out once a week. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or Google+. Again, just search Gotham TV Podcast, and we should appear like a bright, shining star in your search browser, and we will be more than happy to see you following us, liking our page, or +1ing us on Google+. Remember, any comments, thoughts, discussions, or reviews left on iTunes till the end of Gotham Season 1 will all go into a hat if we talk about them on air, and will be in line to win a Christopher Uminga signed print of Oswald Cobblepot, along with some other goodies, which I think we can say which one of those will be.
Okay.
So, in addition to the Christopher Uminga print, we can also then say that the first 5 issues of Gotham by Midnight will also be in the winner's pack, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And that has artwork by Ben Templesmith, and that's part of the reason why that will also be going in as well, to keep the artwork theme of the prize.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben Templesmith is definitely one of our favourite artists over here at Gotham TV Podcast. We had the pleasure of meeting him at New York Comic Con as well, and we wanted to get the full set of his issues from Gotham at Midnight. He's done just the first 5 issues. He'll now move on to another artist to do issue 6, but all 5 issues are now out and will be available in the prize pack for the winner of our competition, which is open worldwide, and we will be sending the pack out to whoever wins that prize after the final episode of Gotham.
Remember, any more details, you can go on to gothamtvpodcast.com/competition, and you will be able to see the details of that competition there as well.
Yep. So thanks very much for listening.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening. As always, it's a pleasure.
And we'll be back next week with the next episode of Gotham, which is
The Blind Fortune Teller.
Yeah, I don't know whether I can tell what's going to happen in that episode.
Crystal balls at the ready, everyone.
Thanks very much. We'll talk to you again next week.
Gotham TV Podcast. Do not cross Alan M. Montoya.
Whatever happened to the